All right, hello everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us for Left Bank Books Presents Online, international best-selling author Fredrik Backman in conversation with Jordan Moblo from Jordy's Book Club. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore, celebrating 51 years this year. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Fredrik and Jordan, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. We have adapted to the current situation. We are doing curbside pickup, delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world even. So if you are joining us from Sweden, what a joy. Thank you. We are happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and to make the world a better place. We do hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Fredrik Backman and Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy, an actual signed copy for you and all of your friends at left-bank.com, and I will be sharing that link in just a moment in the comments. Purchasing a copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore open and here through the most unusual of times, so thank you for your support. I am Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books, and most importantly, huge Fredrik Backman fan. I have read all of the books, and I am so excited to be here today. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the event, so be sure to type those up as a comment. And you can follow Left Bank Books on Facebook to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. From the #1 New York Times bestselling author of A Man Called Ove and writer of astonishing depth comes a poignant, charming novel about a crime that never took place, a would-be bank robber who disappears into thin air, and 8 extremely anxious strangers who find they have more in common than they ever imagined. Looking at real estate isn't usually a life or death situation, but an apartment open house becomes just that when a failed bank robber bursts in and takes a group of strangers hostage. The captives include a recently retired couple who relentlessly hunt down fixer-uppers to avoid the painful truth that they can't fix their own marriage. There's a wealthy bank director who has been too busy to care about anyone else, and a young couple who are about to have their first child but can't seem to agree on anything, from where they want to live to how they met in the first place. Add to the mix an 87-year-old woman who has lived long enough not to be afraid of someone waving a gun in her face, a flustered but still ready to make a deal real estate agent, and a mystery man who has locked himself in the apartment's only bathroom. And you've got the worst group of hostages in the world. Rich with Fredrik Backman's pitch-perfect dialogue and an unparalleled understanding of human nature, Anxious People is an ingeniously constructed story about the enduring power of friendship, forgiveness, and hope, the things that save us even in the most anxious times. And Kirkus Library Journal says, a tight-knit, surprise-filled narrative, the brisk, absorbing action prompts meditation on marriage, parenting, responsibility, and global economic pressures. Comedy, drama, mystery, and social study, this novel is undefinable except for the sheer reading pleasure it delivers. Highly recommended, and I agree with those words so much. Fredrik Backman is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of A Man Called Ove. My grandmother asked me to tell you she's sorry. Britt Marie Was Here, Beartown, Us Against You, and 2 novellas. And every morning the way home gets longer and longer, and The Deal of a Lifetime, as well as 1 work of nonfiction, Things My Son Needs to Know About the World. His books are published in more than 40 countries. This novel came out today. Anxious People came out today. He lives in Stockholm, Sweden with his wife and 2 children, so he's joining us from all the way across the ocean. And you can connect with him on Twitter at Bachmanland, or on Instagram, BachmanSK. And today, Fredrik will be in conversation with Jordan Moblo. Jordan is a book nerd from Los Angeles, running the popular Bookstagram account, Jordy's Book Club, jordys.book.club. And that is Instagram.com/jordys.book.club. Yay. And now I am so excited, and I'm just thrilled to be able to introduce Fredrik Backman for the first time. This is my first time getting to meet him, and I've been a longtime fan. and also Jordan Moblo, who we have hosted before. So I'm really excited for this event. Today is the release day, the book birthday for Anxious People. You can order your copy at left-bank.com. And now, if everyone would please help me in a humongous round of applause for Fredrik Backman and Jordan Moblo. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Is this working out? It's like it's mirrored. I'm not used to the technology either way, but I'm not used to if I move my head one way, it moves the other way in the screen. I'm working on this, but now I'm centered and nice, and this is going to work out.
Well, Fredrik, like Shane, I am a huge fan of your books as well. I've actually met many of my book friends by talking about your books with them. I mean, Beartown was my first foray into your books, and I am just obsessed with that world. So I'm honored to be here today talking to you on the U.S. release date of Anxious People, and congratulations on that. And before we get into the book, I think that for many of the people who are watching right now who aren't aware of your career trajectory, you've been a forklift driver before, you were a blogger before you became a worldwide best-selling author. And I thought maybe you could tell everyone who's listening right now a little bit about your career evolution and how you jumped from blogging into writing books.
Yeah, I don't know how it happened. You find a banana peel and you slide it into a career. No, I mean, trying to make a very long story fairly short, it's I always had this idea that I wanted to write. I like telling stories. Storytelling is my first love, not really being an author. That was never my goal. I just like telling stories in one way or in one form or another. And I did a bunch of things. I never thought about being an author. I never thought I could make a living out of it. But when I was 25, I had been doing just odd jobs here and there. Didn't really get my act together. And I studied for a while just to get my mom off my back about getting my life together. And so I studied religion for a couple of years. And then at 25, I just kind of decided that I was gonna give myself a year and try to make a living out of writing. So I said, so I got a job as my best friend manages a warehouse, so he gave me a job as a forklift driver. Anecdote, he also at that same time gave a job to another friend who was equally bad at getting his life together. He also got a job, and we drove a forklift next to each other, and he won a couple of years later. He won the Swedish Idol competition when I was number one at like the bestseller list. And our friend, the happiest guy was our best friend, who felt that this way he didn't have to take us back because we were really bad workers. So I did that work for a while, and then I had this idea that, all right, I'm going to drive a forklift on nights and on weekends so I can pay the rent, and then I'll give myself a year to try and make a living out of writing. And I just started writing for magazines, and since this was that ancient time where there were still magazines, I started writing for those, and I wrote for free because that's how I got jobs. I said, can I write something for your magazine? And they said no. I said, I write for free, and I was like, I will find you something. And so I wrote for free for, I think, a good while of that year, and then just worked myself into kind of tricking people that I knew what I was doing, and then kind of figured out that maybe I can write comedic stuff. I can write columns. I can be, I figured out that I could be funny, and I could also annoy people, and these are two things that I have made a living off since. And so I did that for a little while, and then I got a job at a magazine. I moved to Stockholm, which is about 600 kilometers from where I grew up, and I moved there. I met my wife the first day there. Took her about a month to realize that I existed, but we met that first day, and then I just I worked my way from there, and the blogging phenomenon was starting up, and I jumped onto that and felt this could be something that I could do, because bloggers seem to be annoying, and I am good at annoying people. I think it could work. And so I did that, and then from there on out, then we got our first kid, and it was just the sense that I had this idea that I wanted to write a novel, and when we had our first child, I think something just clicked in me that I understood, like there's never going to be a perfect time to write a novel, because I will never have any free time ever again, because I'm someone's parent now, and there's never going to be a good time for me anymore, because up until then you walk around, you wait for that perfect moment where you feel like, at some point I'm going to have 6 months and I'm just going to write. I'm just going to go to a cabin somewhere and I'm just going to write. And then you have your first child and you realize, like, I'm never going to do anything that I want ever again. So I just decided there that if I want to write a novel, I'll do it now. So I wrote nights and weekends. I wrote a lot of nights when I was, when I was up rocking the stroller anyway. And I wrote that first novel there. And then things just got a little bit out of hand from there.
And now you just find time to write your books, even though you've got kids. You just have to find those nights and weekends still, right?
Yeah, I mean, now seems like I write full time now, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But what I realized was that I've talked to a lot of writers about this. That the funny thing is that it takes you about the same amount of time to write a book anyway. Because it takes me about a year to write a novel. But I can write other things, I can produce other things during that year. There could be a novella, and there could be a screenplay, there could be whatever. But the novel it takes a year no matter what I do, because it takes a year to think.
Sure.
For me. That's doesn't matter that you have time to write. You have to think first, and the thinking part takes me about a year from start to finish, and no matter how I go about it. That's why I usually tell people who ask for writing advice that people always talk about what's your writing process, like how do you set aside time for writing, and I'm of the opinion that it's more important to set a time for thinking.
Sure. And I was reading some other interviews this morning in preparation for this one, and you said before that you think you're a better storyteller than writer. And I think millions of readers would argue with you on that. And I'm curious what you think the difference is between being a storyteller and a writer, and how do you come up with your stories?
Well, I'm not, I don't say that to be humble or anything. It's not, I'm not trying to put myself down. It's just that I try to make the likeness to musicians. There were a lot of better musicians than the Beatles. I mean, probably no one in the Beatles was the best in the world at their respective instrument. There was a better guitar player, there was a better drummer, there was a better bass player. There were better musicians. You can look at a musician and you can say, wow, technically, like what you can do to that instrument, very few people can do. And I'm not that. in writing, because there are writers like that. There are writers that I can look at and say, it's unbelievable that we use the same language. It's that you have the same amount of words at your disposal, but what you do with them to explain something is something that I would have never thought of. And those writers are the geniuses. Those are the ones that change literature and change the way we think about books and stories, and they push the envelope. And there are very few of those, and I'm not one of them, and I've always known I wasn't one of them, and I'm fine with it. And I think that's been one of my greatest blessings career-wise, that I knew to begin with that I'm not a genius, and I'm not exceptional. I'm very ordinary, but that means that the things that I like are probably things that other people are gonna like. I'm already on the same level as the people who are gonna read this. I don't have to, because the geniuses is always gonna have that problem with dumbing themselves down so the rest of us can understand what the hell they're talking about. And I don't have that problem. I'm dumb enough already, and that's not to bring myself down. It's just a fact that, just as in music, I view, in music there's two elements of music. There's playing the instrument, and you can be technically perfect at playing the instrument, but it's also the fact that, can you write a song? Because the most popular songs are, most often 3 or 4 chords. They're very simple in their structure. That's why, most of the most popular pop songs in the world, a 13-year-old can play them. They're not hard to play, but not everyone can write them. And that's the difference for me between storytelling and writing. I'm not an exceptional writer. But because I view myself in the first place as a storyteller. I tell stories, and
I think that, look, you might say you're not an exceptional writer, but I think what you definitely excel at, and I think you're an exceptional writer, by the way, but I think you really excel at character. And I've found that I'm one of those readers that I struggle to remember when I'm reading a book who is who and who the characters are. And I actually find myself with these Post-it notes of who the characters are for the first 100 pages, trying to keep track of people. And with you and your books, I find that you make it look so easy to introduce readers to so many characters. Like in Beartown, there's 20 plus characters that you have to keep track of. You do such a beautiful job of introducing them and really differentiating them and making it so easy to keep track of. And I think I really notice it in Anxious People, where you kind of introduce the anonymous cop and the anonymous robber, and then you kind of start to fill in the details until you have these really rich, interesting characters that are unforgettable. And so I'm curious, when you write your books, are you coming up with an idea first, or are you coming up with character first? What is the priority? What is important to you there?
I think I've come to learn about myself that I think I start with emotions. I start most of all with the emotion I want you to have when you close the book, when you finish the story and you close the book, because I figure you have maybe 30 seconds of someone's life after they close the book where they feel something, where it stays with you. And that might be 30 seconds, it might be a couple of minutes. It's not going to be, because then their kids starts fighting in the other room, or the phone rings, or, and they're done with you. It's over. But you have like maybe 30 seconds, a minute of someone's life there where they close the book, and it's really intimate, that emotion between the reader and the writer, like, we're done. I've told you the story exactly the way I wanted you to hear it. And that I start with that emotion. I start with what I want to leave you with at the end. And usually from there, comes a story, and then I always have like 10, 15 story ideas in my head at any given time. There's always 10, 15 ideas swirling around, and they can live in my head for years. Anxious People was probably 3 different ideas that I had for years. One was the premise, the setting of it. Like, it would be funny to have a hostage situation at an open house, because my wife and I went to a lot of open houses, and it turns out I don't care where we live. I have very little interest in where we live. It's at like the fifth viewing, I was like, I don't care. All of these looks fine. I don't care. If you're happy, if the kids are happy, I really don't, I really don't mind what street we live on, or even city. I could probably move to a different country if you wanted me. As long as you're here, and and I get to do the things that I like to do, I'm fine. And so I look at people. So I looked at people at this open house, and I started thinking like everybody here hates each other, because everyone here are enemies, fighting for we're competition here.
Sure.
And I thought that would be a funny setting if all these people got locked in a room together and couldn't get out, and I had to work together. That would be funny. And then I had this idea for a hostage situation. I thought that would make a nice comedy. And then that swirled around in my head for years. And then I had, it kind of merged with this idea that I had, that I wanted to write a closed room mystery. Because I just thought that was an interesting writing experiment for me, to see if I could do it. And I wanted to do that and see, and that kind of merged with this backstory that I had about a tragedy of someone's life, and how that interacts with everyone in the book, how everyone is affected by this tragedy that happened in this small town a certain number of years ago, and how everyone is affected by it, whether they understand it or not, and how those little threads between people, those little invisible things that hold us together, if I could make a relationship drama out of that, and still make it funny and entertaining. So that's how it started. But I start with an emotion, and from that grows usually a set of characters, and then a story. And the characters are usually there's usually way more characters to begin with, and I have to take them away if they don't evolve into people. They have to become people to me. I have to care about them. They have to become real to me. I have to have this sense that I'm defending them. And if you have this feeling that, I can tell them, if you have this feeling as a reader that you can tell them apart, that you don't confuse, that you don't have to use the post notes, then that's a great success for me. And hopefully it's because I care so much about these people that when I explain them to you, you get them immediately.
Yeah.
So every time I turn back to them, they'll have little things, little mannerism, little ways of talking that makes you immediately recognize, oh, it's that person. I remember that person because she talks this way, or she has this little thing that she does, or I remind you of something that she wears or something. I very rarely tell you what people look like. That's I tell you who they are and how they talk and how other people view them and what their relationships are. That's how I and then hopefully you'll cast them in your head, and your casting is probably way better than mine. So I very rarely tell you what people look like.
Interesting. And knowing how much you don't like going to open houses and don't care where you live, was there research that you had to do for this book? Did you have to go to open houses again to get the
No, my wife took me to enough. Trust me, she took me to enough open houses. I talked to enough. What do you call them? You call them brokers?
Real estate agents, brokers.
Real estate agents. Yeah, I
Yeah.
talked to enough. Yeah, I
You had
talked
enough
to
research.
enough of them. My wife and I had a huge fight because she had to explain to me that we're not going to buy an apartment based on what real estate agents you like. That's not how this is going to work. We're going to buy the apartment we want. Yeah, but I don't like that real estate agent. I thought he was, thought he was a jackass, honey. Yeah, he was, but that's still. So that was a huge fight. But we ended up buying the apartment, of course. But
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But no, I that part I didn't have to do research for, but I did a lot of research for other things. I read a lot of like closed room mysteries. That was a rabbit hole I disappeared into for a little while, with great joy, because it was a new writing technique for me, and I learned a lot, and I read things that I probably wouldn't have read otherwise, and and I talked to a friend who's a criminologist. You call it that? When you study criminology, but on like a university level. Talked a lot to him. Talked a lot to a couple of cops, because I wanted to understand like the difference between being a cop in Stockholm, which is the capital of Sweden, and being a cop in a smaller city, not unlike the city where I grew up. So I did a lot of research on those kind of things, and then this was a book also that I had to. I did a lot of emotional research, if you can call it that. And I had to think a lot and dig a lot in myself, and find some personal notes where you write something and it kind of crosses into personal experiences, and it starts hurting a little bit, and that's it starts getting tough, and that's when I know I'm onto something. That's when I feel something. When I break down a little bit, then I know that this might be something.
Yeah, I mean, let's break that down a little bit, because you definitely have a lot of different tones in this one, and you do in most of your books, where you kind of juggle humor and hard, and this one's a little zany, like the different points of view. And I love the interrogations between all of the characters. And so I was curious what your intentions were behind those interrogations, because I think when you're starting to read them, they're kind of vague, and you're kind of frustrated because the police officers aren't getting any answers from the characters, and you're wondering what's actually going on here. And so I'm curious, like, what was the thought process behind the interrogations and the characters being so vague? And I don't want to give spoilers away or anything, but I just thought it was one of my favorite parts of the book.
No, it's I mean, the idea was that I wanted to write a comedy, I wanted to write a relationship drama, and I wanted to write a closed room mystery. And the idea was to not let you know what story you're reading, and kind of use all three to distract you from what's really going on, so I can keep hitting you over the back of the head with things. So I'll use smokes and mirrors. It's like you're on stage performing a magic trick. It's I have to set a couple of things up here, so I need to distract you. So once in a while, I'll distract you with an emotion. I'll distract you with maybe getting you to feel something for this character that I'm feeling for this character, and telling you something that is hurting me and hurting this character. And while you're busy with that, I'll put some things in motion that you will maybe not be aware of, and then a couple of pages later, I can hit you over the head with it and say, this was going on all the time. You just didn't notice that I was, I gave you all the clues, but you were busy doing other things. You were looking this way, or smokes and mirrors. And the interrogations were a way for me to start. I mean, the basic plot is there's a failed bank robber who runs into an open house viewing of an apartment and holds everyone hostage, and everyone is stuck in this apartment with the robber. And when the police, and then that goes on for a couple of hours, and we get to know early in the book that this goes on for a couple of hours, and then the robber gives up. The police surrounds the building, the robber gives up and releases all the hostages. But as the police enters the apartment, it's empty and the robber is gone. And then we get to read the interrogations that takes place afterwards, where the police are trying to figure out what happened in the apartment. And that's the close through mystery part. But then I added, because I enjoy difficult people, I enjoy jackasses a lot more than I enjoy, people who behave. I like the ones who start fights, and I like the ones who don't do things the way they're supposed to, and kind of, march to the beat of their own drum. Is that the saying?
Yeah.
These are the people I enjoy. I enjoy troublemakers, and this is the apartment is full of annoying troublemakers, and they're not there to make things easy for the police. And the police figure that out rather quickly. That all right, these are extremely annoying people, and they're also pissed off because they were in a hostage situation.
Right.
So they're already angry and annoyed and hurt, and they're also incredibly frustrating as human beings. And I had that idea that the book would start and you would get to know everyone at their worst. Like every character you would get to know at their worst possible day. Because I have that feeling that most people you meet, if you meet them on their worst possible day, then most people are jackasses. Most people are horrible. But then I would, let you know things along the way that would make you forgive their worst attributes. But I would introduce them at their worst. So basically every character is introduced as their worst. And that was a comedic thing that I used, but it was also something that I used to let the story grow emotionally. But it was also part of the smokes and mirrors thing, that if I do this, I'll be able to do some things along the way that you might not see. And I can play around with people's prejudice, and I enjoy that. And I especially enjoy playing around with the prejudice of people who are convinced that they have no prejudice. This is one of my favorite things to do in the world. And so when you closing in on the end of the book, hopefully you'll feel, oh wait, no, he must have messed up. You'll go back and you'll see that, no, I didn't say that. You just assumed. Because you assumed that you were always the smartest person in the room, and I like to play around with
that. I also think it's interesting you bring up like the prejudices, because I think something that's great about your books also is that so many of them take place in smaller towns and communities versus big cities. And I think the cities and towns are their own character in their own self, especially when you have like the bumbling police officer and his son, and then you have kind of the snarky bank teller that I feel like it inhibit this really fun small town. And I'm curious why you're drawn to writing these small towns and communities versus setting your stories in more bigger cities and metropolitan areas.
Well, I'm from a smaller city to begin with. I think that's or I grew up in a smaller city, and that probably plays into it. I like smaller cities a lot more. I live in a big city now. We live in Stockholm now. We live outside of Stockholm, but if it was up to me, we'd probably live in the forest someplace. I don't like big cities. I don't feel comfortable in them. People get frustrated with me because when I've been fortunate enough to do touring in the United States, which is a big thing for a Scandinavian author. Very few Scandinavian authors get to do that, and people are like, "Oh, it must have been great to go to New York or go to LA," and I don't like New York
No,
and
thank
LA.
you.
And people get very frustrated with me for that, but it's I don't enjoy big cities. I don't. I like smaller places. So that's probably personal, but it's also the fact that I'm not very interested in extraordinary people. I'm interested in ordinary people. I don't write books about presidents or astronauts or rock stars, because I'm not very interested in them. I'm interested in the people that I meet at the grocery store. And I'm not interested in talking to them because I generally don't like people. I just like watching them. It's just I'm interested in annoying people and troublemakers because I'm one of them. I'm one of those who have a hard time being liked. I have to grow on people. You don't like me immediately. You need to meet me like 10 times before that. Oh, all right, he's all right. It's all right. He's not as annoying as I thought he was.
You're at your worst at the beginning, and then we slowly get to know you, right?
But also I like the closed setting of things. I like a small town. I like one street. I would like one house, one apartment. The closer the setting, the more space there is for drama. I feel I don't have to tell you everything about the environment all the time.
Sure. And then I also wanted to touch base because mental health is a big part of this book as well, and obviously anxiety is such a big part of modern life, especially right now, and a topic that you've addressed publicly and on a personal level. Excuse me. And I was hoping that maybe you could talk a little bit about that and how you decided to address anxiety and mental health in this book.
Yeah, that it probably came around. This was the first novel that I wrote that I didn't have the title to begin with. Usually, I know the title when I start writing, and the title for this one was Open House to begin with, and then I changed it halfway in to Anxious People, and when I did, I figured out like, oh, this is probably what I'm really trying to say. This is the story that I'm trying to purvey here. And then I went back and I rewrote the first couple of chapters based on that. And that was the first time I've done that. Usually I'm more of I know where I'm going to begin with. But it was because I started digging into myself and I started realizing like, all right, there's something I can tell here. And it's a lot about everyday anxieties. It's a lot about that feeling that most people have, like they look at everyone else and feel like everyone else knows what they're doing. Everyone else has their life together and knows where they're going and what they're doing at all times. I'm the only one like stumbling around in the darkness and just hanging on for bare life every morning to just get through the day. But a lot of people have that feeling, and I started there that's common ground. That's where we can meet. Like if you have that feeling as well, that you don't know what the hell you're doing and you're just faking it to everyone, then you and me, we can relate.
Yeah.
And from that grew that I also wanted to tell something about. I mean, this is a story about. Part of the story is about someone ending their life, and that came from one of my very, very a close friend of mine who ended his when I was 19, 20 years old. So that's close to 20 years ago now. And it's been 20 years and it still affects me. It's 20 years and I'm not over it. I'll never be over it. It'll never be done for me. Because it affects you. It defines you in a way. When someone close to you ends their life, and it never stops. And I mean, it's no coincidence that, I mean, a lot of my books, a lot of my stories have touched on suicide one way or another. Like that's a recurring theme for me, and that's, of course, not a coincidence. It's not that I mean to do it. It's just that I keep coming back to it naturally, because I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to process it, and that came into play when I wrote this. And I didn't think about that to begin with, but then that kind of grew as a side plot for the story and a background for the story. And so I wanted to. I wanted to write something about that and try to make it in a comedic setting. Like, I wanted to tell you, and I wanted to, hopefully the way that at the end of the book you will feel like, oh, this wasn't a comedy, and it wasn't really a mystery. This was a book about anxiety, like overcoming anxiety, people trying to live with their anxieties. Oh, I wasn't prepared for that. And then I would go back and say, it's called Anxious People. I said it on the cover. But I distracted you. And at the end, this was what we were talking about all along. That was my basic idea. Then I don't know if I pulled it off or not. Maybe people read the book.
I think you
That's
did.
not how I interpreted it at all, Fredrik. But so be it. But yeah, I wanted to, and I like talking about. I like talking about really complicated emotions in a comedic setting. I think that works very well.
You do a really good job of balancing both, and I think that they want to open it up to audience questions. But my last question, going off of ending the book and going back to what we were talking about previous, what is the emotion that you want to leave readers with when it comes to Anxious People? Those 30 seconds, what emotion should they be feeling?
That you're not alone. We're all, most of us are struggling too, and most of us don't know what we're doing either. And it's just, you get through the day, and that's enough. And at the end of the day, it's all right. We got through this one, and there'll be another one tomorrow. And we get up, we try again. That's what I wanted to portray, I think, in the last page. The things that you tell your kids when things go wrong for your kids and they have a tough day, you tell them that I know this feels like the end of the world, but it's really not. And it feels like the end of the world now, but we'll get up tomorrow and it'll be a little better, and we'll try again. We didn't succeed the first time, but we'll try again. We'll go at it once more. We'll do our best. And that's also the thing that you tell your kids. I don't expect you to be the best. I expect you to do your best, and it's enough. And that's what I wanted people to walk away with. I also wanted to say something to people who have someone close to them who ends their life. I wanted to say something about it. Like, I wanted to say something that I know it doesn't end. It doesn't. It's just, you keep at it. So that's probably, and you're not alone.
Great.
We're messed up too. Hi, I'm back. Thank you for making me kind of tear up right before I had to come back onto the screen. So I have read the book twice now. I read it back in, I think, January, and then also listened to it as an audiobook just a couple days ago. So the ending left me in a pool of tears, like a magnificent Olympic-sized pool of tears. So yeah, thank you for telling like making my emotions feel okay, and thank you. So now we're going to do audience Q&A, and I'm going to try to not cry. All right, so we're going to start with a question from Judy. Judy asks, any word on when we'll get the third in the Beartown trilogy?
I'm sorry, what was the third part of the trilogy of Beartown?
Beartown.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, people ask me that a lot, my publisher included, and my agent. It's been a lot of that going on the last year. Like, when will it be done, Fredrik? I don't know. I'm writing it. I'm very busy writing it. It's the first time that I've written a trilogy. It's the first time that I've tried to. It's the first time that I write with expectations. Also, the first time that people ask me a lot, like, what's going to happen with this character, and what's going to happen with this, and when are you done, and I haven't done that before, and no, I get a lot of questions about that. I've had to stop reading some of them because I just feel, I have to write with the notion that 20 people are going to read what I write. I can't write with the notion that a lot of people are like waiting for this. Then everything locks up for me. I can't do that. I have to pretend that it's just me and 20 people who like me. So I don't know, but hopefully it'll be out next year, at least in Scandinavia. So hopefully, hopefully at the beginning of the year-ish in Scandinavia, and like sometime later in the year in the US.
Hopefully. That actually brings up another question that I was trying to find, but I can't. So have all of your novels been, or have all of your books been translated into English already, or do you have like some earlier books that haven't been translated?
I think all the novels have. All the novels definitely have. I think there might be a novella somewhere that I'm not. I've written a lot of weird stuff. I've written a lot of short stories and stuff. Not all published, and some of them published in magazines and whatever. But no, there are no desk novels. Harlan Ellison used that word, like, you should always have a desk novel for when your agent storms into the room, like, why haven't you? You have to. When you have a desk, you have something in your desk, like, here, you can publish that. Yeah. But I don't have a desk novel lying around that's been published in Swedish. No. So you'll have to bear with me in the time frame that I produce things.
That was actually a question from Nancy. I did find the question, and Nancy also asks, have you been approached about a Beartown movie?
It's being made into a TV show as we speak in Swedish for HBO, the Nordic HBO Nordic, it's called. HBO in the Nordic countries. So it's been made in a TV show. I think it premieres this fall, so soon. And it's in Swedish. They shot it in the north of Sweden this winter and last winter and spring, I think. They had just finished shooting everything when the pandemic hit, so they were going into editing, so they were able to finish it. And I think it premieres this fall, and I haven't seen it because I felt that it would mess with my head too much if I saw how someone interprets the story and how everyone looks, and all the creative choices that a director has to make. And I just took a decision that maybe I don't watch it. Maybe I finish the third part of the book first. My wife has watched it. She handles everything that's like TV and movies and all the rights and all the negotiations and all the meetings and all the, all the people with opinions and suits and papers and documents. She handles everything. I'm not allowed in that room, which works out pretty good for everyone. But so I focus on writing because I tried to be involved with the TV and the movie things and all of the negotiations and everything, and I burned myself out, and I had a big health crash 3 years ago, which took me 6 months to recover from, and a lot of time in therapy because I was stressed out, and from that point on, my wife took over, and now she's the boss of everything. And everyone feels better about that than having to deal with me. No, she's seen it. She says she's told me to, don't worry about it. Just finish your book. Go in your room. So it's made from a director that my wife and I really, really love, called Peter Granlund. Who's made fantastic movies, and we'll see. It's an interpretation. Everything is an interpretation when it comes to movies and TV shows, and you have to be okay with that. That's my wife's rule. We don't give up the rights if you can't live with them changing stuff. Don't come crying about it, is her actual words. Like, don't come crying about it, then just don't give them the rights to begin with. Just, you don't have to let them make a movie out of it, Fredrik. You don't, just keep it then. But if you let people, if you give them the rights, then let them do their jobs. So I'm trying my best to do that. I'll complain a little in a way, but, I'll cry a little about it.
So we have a question from Annie. What is your reason for not giving some characters names? For example, Kira's coworker in Beartown. And she says, I think Kevin's father, if I remember correctly. And that's something I wonder about as well.
It comes back to your question, Jordan, when we were talking. It's when you were talking about not having to make Post-it notes and keeping track of all the characters. You develop little tricks, and when I write something, I try really hard to make it as easy as I possibly can for the reader. I want the reader to not be confused. I want to make it easy for you to understand where I'm going with things. And one of those things is, if you're confused about who is this and who is this character and where did he come from, and you have to, then that it ruins my chances to talk to you. And so I developed little tricks. You work hard with the names. Sometimes that plays into translation, like Kira in Beartown. She's called Mira in Swedish, but she was actually renamed for the American version of the book, because we figured out, my editor Peter Borland figured out that, well, Mira that's going to be pronounced Myra in English, and Myra and Maya is too close names, like as a mother and daughter. They're going to be confused in the reader's head all the time. Myra, Maya. And they're not in Swedish because you pronounce them altogether different. And these are things that I think about. Like, I try not to confuse you. And that goes into how you name people. And that also goes into the fact that you can't if I don't give everyone a name, then you're not confused by who is this person. Like, oh, you might be annoyed. Like, why is she always called the colleague and never get a name? Because if I name her, then you have one more name to keep track of. And it's not important that you know the name of this character. It's not important. This character can rename Nameless, and that's fine. And every time I refer to her, you will know who she is. And that's just a thing that I use once in a while. That some people are the journalist or the colleague or the priest or whatever they are, the neighbor, and or I can give people nicknames and stuff because otherwise it's really hard to have like 20 characters, give everyone names, and not have you confuse them. So it's just a thing that I do. I know it annoys a lot of people, but it's also there with a purpose.
And it has been asked at least once. So it's Uwe, correct? Or how do you?
Uwe. It's
Uwe.
like the middle part of Hoover. Uwe.
And that's how it's pronounced in Swedish as well.
I'm sorry?
That's how it's pronounced in Swedish, like, or
Uwe. Yeah,
okay.
Uwe. Like Hoover. It's right there. It's. I figured that out my first US tour. People kept asking me, like, how is it pronounced? Like, oh, we don't have that in English. It's right there. It's in the middle part of Hoover. Uwe. Uwe. Hoover. Hoover. Uwe.
Obviously.
It's right there. You use it. It's that's the easiest way for me to explain it. It's but to be honest, it was the whole reason that is called Uwe is because it's such an incredibly common Swedish name for a man of that generation. It's super common. So it would be like a man called Alan or a man called Stan or a man called Jim in the US. And I thought that was funny when I wrote it. I thought that was a funny title of a book, like a man called and then a really common name, because people would be like, why would you name a book that? And they would, and they would turn around to the bookstore. And I thought, then, I have a chance of you buying the book. And that, because I had no idea that it was going to be translated. And then it got translated. And then, this is the weirdest name in every country other than Sweden. And so that kind of backfired, that joke. But it worked here.
All right, so we will take one more question. This is going to be from Danette. Danette asks, do you think and write only in Swedish or ever in English? And saying, like, now that you have such a huge English fan base, would you still, like, my question is, would you still name a character Uwe?
Oh, you mean like that? It's if I take that into consideration now. Not with the names so much. I might. There might be times where I've thought of a name, but then again, it might work in English then, but then my book is published in South Korea, and who knows what's a weird name there? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's weird in the Czech Republic or Brazil. I have no idea. So I try not to think about it that much. But what I do think about, I think a little bit more now is word jokes, because I really like word puns. You call them that? Like one thing that also means another thing, and you can make a joke out of it. It's I have fewer of those now, because I had a lot of them in my first couple of novels, and the translators were just like, oh my god, this is like untranslatable. Like this is super funny in Swedish, because in Swedish the word for married and the word for poison are the same, and that's incredibly funny. That's super funny if you know it, but it's like incomprehensible in the rest of the world, and it's not doesn't work in translation. So I do fewer of those now. I don't change the names that much, but I do fewer word puns. Yes, but I wouldn't write. If the question was, would you think in English or would you write in English? I don't think I will, because it's a more complex language than you think. it has a very distinct rhythm, especially American English has a very distinct rhythm to things that you kind of have to be, I think you at the very least have to live with that language for a long time to be able to write in it in that sense. And then, we have there's this thing that we often use in Scandinavia when someone thinks that they're a little bit overconfident about their English. They feel like they're fluent in English, and there's this thing that you tell them to, go into the kitchen and name everything, because barely no one can do that. Even if you feel like, I speak really good English, and then you go into the kitchen, name everything, you can't. It's I have no idea what this is called in English, so that's just a humbling exercise you can do. So whenever I get that if I ever get that idea that I'm going to write something in English, that's what my wife is going to say: name everything in the kitchen and we'll talk about it.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for doing this event. Jordan, thank you so much for being in conversation with Fredrik. Hopefully that we will be able to have you actually physically in St. Louis at some point for a future book. I know that there are a lot of fans of yours here in St. Louis, myself included. So I just want to say thank you.
I'll come watch hockey.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a pleasure, and I know that you're struggling right now. I know that it wasn't something that the bookshops they weren't in need of another challenge to begin with, and I'm really glad that you're doing this, and I'm really glad that you get people to log into these events, and I'm really happy that people seem to be still buying books and still trying to support their local shops. But I know it's really rough, and I hope you pull through to the other side.
Thank you. Well, for the audience, have a great rest of your day, however much longer that is, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.